Does your anime faces look flat and boring? Because mine did. Therefore, let me give you 30 the most important tips that will help you draw much better anime faces. Tip number 1. The first step will help you avoid your anime characters looking like they don't have brain, but also will make them look a little bit more appealing. So tip number 1 is to make your heads bigger. So while I was studying anime faces, I observed that the heads are actually much bigger than I used to draw normal faces. So how can we do that? And it's super simple. So first we can just lower the line where we draw the eyes. So when I have a normal head, what I do is I often just put the eyes in the middle. But now we can just push the eyes a little bit lower, and in the middle we can draw the eyebrows. So this will naturally make the head look bigger, more volume here. The other thing is that we can just draw a bigger cranium, and for that I actually like to draw an egg shape for more like a side view or 3/4 view. And then you just add a simple jaw shape and you have a bigger head. So now tip number 2, and here we can actually use the previous tip because this will make your faces much more appealing, and also it makes your characters look a little bit younger. So tip number 2, push the eyes a little bit down. So for example here we have our head, it would be at top of the head because there's a little bit of volume of the hair, and now if we put a straight line in the middle and place a line in between these two, so maybe somewhere here, this is the middle of the face, but now the eyes we put a little bit below that. Okay. And then around here we can put eyebrows. So the same we can do for the side view. So here would be the top of the head, maybe a little bit even higher. Then we have a bottom, boom. Middle would be somewhere around here. So we have our eyes a little bit lower. Now also if you want my brushes, they're for free in the description below. And with them you'll get 30 art tips that will help you improve your art in 30 days. But also if you're struggling with drawing faces, then you can check out the course that I'm making on how to actually draw much better stylized faces, which is currently half off until I finish it and drop it. So link in the description. Now tip number 3, and this tip will help you avoid your faces looking like super messy. And also you won't be guessing where to put some facial features or whatever lines. So tip number 3, simplify the head. And we can use, as I said before, a simple shapes like a ball, an egg, and a simple shape for a jaw, which can be like either 4 lines like that, boom, or even the same, but you just cut this and you have this chin. So we can do either pointy one or just like a more thicker one. That's all you need to draw a basic heads. For example, here we can see this here, 1, 2, boom, 1, 2, and we have a simple egg shape here. Something like that. Boom. And this will help you create a really strong base on which you can just draw facial features. So middle line, then eye line, boom, eyebrow line, the nose between this and that, boom. And you can just draw a face with that. And you don't have to like draw eyes first, boom, then a nose, then a mouth, then maybe like a chin, because you see now it looks just weird. Tip number 4. So I remember when I first heard about this tip, it just opened my eyes. And the tip is super simple. So tip number 4 is use small, medium, big. And how can we use that on our anime faces? So one way is to make different sizes for facial features. So for example here, we can see that the eyes are pretty big. Then we have a nose, which is a little bit smaller than that, but still somewhere in the middle because the lips are really small. Even here we have bigger eyes and actually small lips and nose. Here we have a bigger eyes again, a smaller nose and a medium lips. And same here, bigger eyes, a medium nose, smaller lips. This will give your anime faces much more variety and it will just make them look much more appealing. For example, here we have bigger eyes, a medium nose and a smaller lips. But we can also use this tip for the thirds of the face. So for example here we can take this third here, this third, and maybe here would be somewhere a forehead. So we have a big one, a medium one and a smaller one. And you can just play with these proportions. Tip number 5. Have you ever wondered why your anime faces are super flat? Because I did. And one thing that helped me was tip number 5. So whenever we draw faces, we just tend to draw a simple ball, then we just draw a simple round of the face, then a cheek, jaw, boom, and we have it, and then a straight line. But to be honest, faces are curved, so we want to actually curve this line, boom. Same with the forehead one, the nose one. It will add a lot of depth to your face, but also we can use that for facial features. So for example, we can start with a simple ball for eyes and then just draw eyelids around that, and just remember about the curvature of the ball, boom. And we have a nice eyelids, an eye. We can do even the same thing for mouths, but anime mouth are super simplified. Now, tip number 6 will also help you with your faces, will also help you with avoiding your faces looking super flat. So tip number 6, add overlap. And for that we need a simple T-lines. Now, what are T-lines? So pretty much imagine just two balls, one in front of the other. Let's just do two balls, and this one is in front, this one is back. Now, when their outlines actually overlap, we see that they create these T-lines. Boom. Here we have the front one, and here the back one. Same here, boom. 1, 2 T-lines. And with that we can show a lot of overlap. So for example here, we see that the eye is behind the nose, and here we have a T-line, boom, like that. Now another one is the cheek and the nose again, boom, T-line. You can also use that for the chin and jaw, T-line, boom. Even here we can do T-lines like that. Even here, boom, another one here again, boom. So using these will add a lot of depth to your drawings. Even on the hair, boom, 1 T-line. Even on the lips here, boom, 1, 2. Even on the lollipop, boom, 1, 2. So I use T-lines. Now here we have tip number 7. And this one is just really good to remember when you're drawing faces in side view. So here we want to actually remember this flow here in the front of the face. So starting from the forehead, boom, we go in, then on the nose we go out, then again in for the lips, out again, in, boom, and down. And this flow is super important to remember. For the side view face, we can also add this curve like here, and what it means is just the nose will be, the middle part will be pushed a little bit out. So pretty much something like that, boom. Now tip number 8. So anime necks are actually a little bit thinner than normal ones, and that was a big struggle for me in the beginning. But what I've realized that you can do is pretty much just remember that the neck will be half of the width of the whole jaw. So from here go down like that, then down like that, then chin we have middle, then middle of that. So around here you see that we have our neck, but it goes obviously down, boom. So for front view, it's really simple to remember. Now on the side view, it's a little bit more trickier to do, but what actually helps me is just looking for the corner of the eye here, and then just going straight down, and boom, I place my neck here. And here, the volume of the neck, the width of the neck can be a little bit also trickier. So what I just do is I go a little bit behind the ear. So here would be, I could even actually push this a little bit more here, just a little bit here to add some volume. Now for 3/4, what I realized is that you can just actually look at this eye here, somewhere around like that, and then go straight down, depending on the angle, but even here, around somewhere here, boom, we go down, boom, we have a neck. So for example, even here, boom, we have the neck here. Boom, another one, somewhere around here, boom, go down, boom, we start the neck. Again, same here, boom, neck, boom. Now, tip number 9. So this tip will help your faces look much more appealing, and it's super simple. So tip number 9, simplify facial features. So you can see that these faces are super simple. We have like one small line for the nose, another line for the lips. Eyes are a little bit more detailed, but that also puts more focus on them. So that's a nice contrast between no details, and details. So you can do that. But mostly you see that lips are either like a one line or maybe even 2 lines. Sometimes they are more opened like here, but still super simple. And nose are usually just 2 lines or even 1 line, 2 lines, boom, with a dot for nose. You can also do a small dot, boom, a line again, and maybe a shadow shape. And also eyes, you can do just 2 lines for the upper lid, and then maybe either just 1 or 2 for the lower one, or you can just fully skip it. And that takes us to tip number 10. So tip number 10, erase unnecessary details. So for example here, we see that we don't have the lower eyelid, we only have some eyelashes. Same here, we don't have the inner corners of the eye. Same here again, boom, no corners of the eye. Same here, boom, here. It just, your brain is actually really good at filling the missing details, therefore you can just skip them. And here we can obviously like skip the upper lid, the lower lid, boom, we can just erase that fully. you see that we don't have really a full nose bridge like that. Boom, we have just a simple dot. So again, just erase the details that you don't really need, or that you think that if you erase them, they will just look much better. And even here, you see that we have where the eyelashes and the eyelid goes behind the ear, the eye. And you can just leave this empty even. So tip number 11. And this tip is actually super simple, but it helps a lot with just making a construction for the face. So tip number 11, use eye sockets. So obviously eyes are sitting in the eye sockets, but we can actually draw them. So for that, what I do is basically I just draw 2 lines like this, then 2 lines here and here. And inside you can put a ball and then some simple eyes around this. Also here, boom, and just keep the same angle everywhere. So here and here, boom. So whenever you draw a face like that, you can just place these lines here, boom, boom, and you quickly can spot how it looks. And then just place a ball inside for one eye, boom, then a smaller one for the second eye, and just draw eyelids, boom. Tip number 12. Have you ever struggled with drawing anime faces in perspective? Because I really did. And to fix that, we need to remember something. So tip number 12, angles of the eyes. So pretty much whenever we draw eyes from below, we need to pay attention that the eyelid from up will look more curved and from bottom will look more straight. Something like this, boom. And then obviously we have our eyelashes, boom, going out. But now from above, what will happen is we'll have the upper one a little bit more straight like that, and the bottom one more curved, boom. And then obviously eyebrows almost aligned with this, and here eyebrow would be somewhere here, boom. For example, here we can see that the lower lid is a little bit more straight and the upper one is more curved, boom. And also you can see these curve here. Now from a 3/4 view, we'll see that this side here will be a little bit more squished, something like that, boom. And actually just drawing balls is makes it much easier to just draw these eyes, boom, just follow the curvature of the ball. And obviously from side view, we'll see only this here, boom. Now tip number 13. So there's other thing that is super helpful whenever we draw faces, anime faces in perspective. So tip number 13, placement of the ears. So usually whenever I draw ears, I place them around the bottom of the nose, so somewhere around here, boom, and around the eyes, the top of the eyes, boom. And in the normal view, it just makes sense. But now if we move the head a little bit up or down, we see that the ears will now be below the eyes. And now if we have a face looking a little bit lower, we'll have these eyes higher than eye. So here we can see that we have our eye line here, boom, and ears above that. Now when the head looks up like this, boom, we have our ears below that, boom. Now tip number 14, and this tip will be super useful whenever we just try to render the eyes. So we just need to remember that the iris, so the color of the eye, is like a ball. So from a side view it would be something like that, a really shallow ball, and obviously here would be pupil, so something like that, boom. This is pupil and this is the whole iris, something like this. It's a little bit like a shallow ball. Now above that here we have cornea, so this is like a protective layer which also is like a ball, you can see here, boom. And now when we have a light source, for example going from, let's say here, boom, what it does, it just goes straight here, boom. Here would be our highlight, this goes through that, boom, and here would be our light. So now on this we have a light source going from this, so here we have our highlights, let's say somewhere here, and our light would be here, boom. So we can do, and we can actually just take this and our light would be on this side, so pretty much just on the opposite side of our highlights, like that, boom. And it's super easy to remember. Obviously here would be also shadow, boom, and here light and highlights. Now tip number 15. This one will help you avoid your eyelashes looking like a bug. So tip number 15, group your eyelashes. So pretty much instead of drawing every single one like that, it looks like a bug, we want to actually simplify them and group them up. So instead of drawing a couple of them, just draw one bigger one, boom. And also you don't need a million of them, you just need like 3 2 or 4. Like here we have 1, 2, and then here, then bottom ones 1, 2, and 3. And to be honest, you can just even skip the bottom ones and it will still look good. So 1, 2, 3, and no bottom ones. Tip number 16. So this tip actually helped me a lot. So tip number 16, eyebrows and nose alignment. So pretty much whenever I draw faces in like a more 3/4 view, what I do is I just take the tip of the nose, like here, and the beginning of the eyebrows, and I try to align them. It doesn't have to be perfect, just somewhere around here. Same here, boom, eyebrows going down, tip of the nose. Same here, boom, go down, boom, and even here, boom, boom, and even here, boom, going down, boom. Around here we have our tip of the nose. It's super simple, but it saved a lot of my drawings. Tip number 17, and this one is more for the design of the anime faces. So tip number 17, shape language. So here just pay attention to the shapes that you're using because they can give a different feelings. So for example, if you have like a more sharper shapes like this, boom, the character can be a little bit more dangerous. Like if you have hair like that, like some spikes like this, plus this, boom, can give that feeling. But if you have like more rounded ones, boom, something like this, then a hair maybe some ribbons that go like that, or even just a whole face, like a ball, round cheeks. It can be like more friendlier and like more peaceful. So just pay attention to the shapes that you're using. Now, tip number 18. This is also like more for making your sketches a little bit better. So what I actually like to do is tip number 18, adding shadow shapes. For example, we have some simple ones here, boom, another one here, and sometimes I even put them below the lips. But also we have here, a little bit here, and here. Same again here, boom, and even here, boom, and now a smaller one here. And also around the nose. But this can add a little bit more detail to your sketches and make them a little bit better. Now, tip number 19. Have you ever looked at your anime faces and thought that they actually look lifeless? Because I did. So tip number 17, add color variety to your faces. So for example, here we have a simple skin color for the character and it just looks alright. But if we add a new layer and maybe an airbrush, then pick the color of the skin, make it a little bit more saturated and push it towards reds, and now the middle of the face, we just gently glide and add some redder tones. It will make it much more appealing. And now also if we take the color and make it more yellower and put it on top of the face, on basically a forehead area, it will add a lot of nice variety to the faces. And then we can obviously take and decrease the opacity a little bit. So pretty much what I do is I divide the face into thirds. So we have the upper third for the forehead, then the middle third for between nose and eyebrows, and then a chin one. And pretty much I just put the middle one into more reddish tones, the upper one into yellower, and bottom one into colder. So for female characters you don't have to do that. You just can leave the color, the base color, and it will still look a little bit colder. But for male characters, you can just pick the color, push it a little bit more redder, change the saturation, make it lighter, and just, you see here, glide it. It just looks a little bit like there's facial hair. But also you can add, obviously, colors for the eyes here, boom, boom. You can even add a little bit more reddish tones to a nose, like that, boom, and cheeks. And pretty much like neck, and some other parts that I like to add this. Now, tip number 20, and this tip will actually improve your line art a lot. So tip number 20, add ambient occlusion to your line art. So ambient occlusion is pretty much just a deeper shadow that is in areas that the light has just harder time to get in. So for example, here we can see a little bit of darker shadows. Here, boom, even like this line here is harder and blacker, same here, boom. Now also here, boom. It just adds a lot of nice variety to your line art or sketches even. So even here is darker, like boom, here is darker. And pretty much I do that whenever I just draw some lines. And then we have like a T line. And let's say this is below that. I just tend to thicker this line here and adds a really nice variety. Now tip number 21. So when I first started, my sketches actually looked really boring and unappealing. But one thing helped me. So tip number 21, variety in the lines. And I actually learned that while I was watching some speed paints of League of Legends artists. And basically what I saw is that their outlines, the lines of the characters, are much harder and darker than the ones inside, which are much softer and like lighter. So I try to do the same with the anime characters. So for example, here you can see that the outer lines are much darker than the inner ones. For example, here, like here, even the hair, eyes, here this one is thicker. Here we have like more faint ones. It just adds a lot of appeal into the sketches. Now, tip number 22. So this one can actually help you fix your line art or your sketches when you have like too thick lines. So tip number 22, use Liquify tool. So pretty much we have a setting for our Liquify tool that lets us move things to actually make them much thinner. So for example, you see here, if you make like a super thick lines, we can just go with our Liquify tool like that and just make them thinner. Boom. You see how easy is that? Boom. So for example, if you make this line here too thick, like this, you can just take our Liquify tool and you see that it's super simple to fix it. Boom, like that. And also it actually looks much better and cleaner. And obviously then you can just take the Liquify tool and move it a little bit more like that. Boom, super easy to fix. Tip number 23. So pretty much whenever we just paint and render our character, we have our line art or sketches, which you can see here look super dark. And to help with that, we can do one simple thing, which is tip number 24, which is tip number 23, alpha lock. So pretty much just choose the layer of your line art, alpha lock it, pick the color of the face, then make it much more darker and more redder. Take like an airbrush and just paint it on the line art. Obviously you can pick much darker and put it in some places where it's really nice to have, like here, boom, maybe even eyebrows a little bit, maybe even more darker, boom. It just helps you blend these harsh line art with just the overall color of the face. So boom, boom. It's actually also great for hair. Now tip number 24. Now often when I had my eyes, the iris, and I had like really light color for the light of the eye, and I just placed some highlights, you can see that these highlights doesn't really stand out from the overall iris. So what I realized that is really nice to do is tip number 24. Add contrast to your highlights, and to do that we just pick like a darker color, place it first, maybe here and here, boom. Then we pick our highlight color, just paint it inside, boom. And what it does, it just leaves a little bit of contrast between the light colors and your highlights, boom. And it makes it pop much more. You can also add like maybe a little bit more colors like this to that, maybe even some redder ones, boom. It will also make it pop because of the contrast. Tip number 25. Have you ever tried to draw anime hair but they just looked flat? Because I did. And here the fix is super simple. So tip number 25, simplify hair. So whenever I just draw some anime hair, what I do is I just first lay the biggest shape first. Boom, boom, boom. And then I obviously go into details. So pretty much just start from the biggest to the smallest. For example, here we can do just something like that. Boom, boom. I would do probably something like that. Boom, 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 boom. And obviously here we have our hair. Boom, something like this. This would be the shape of the hair. And then obviously we go add more hair strands. And now to tip number 26, which this tip will help you actually add some details, is tip number 6, add hair strands. So pretty much we just want to see the hair strands as some simple ribbons like that, boom. And this is all we need for the hair. We can see that here we have one, here we have other one, boom, other one, boom. But also remember to have some variety in the sizes of it. So for example, here we have one that is pretty big, then we have a medium one and a smaller one. So we can use this small, medium, big rule here as well. And also try to make them have a cohesive shape language. So the shapes will be similar to each other. Now tip number 28. Here this tip will actually help you place your facial features much better and check the proportions. So tip 28, use mask. So pretty much whenever I draw and I see that I struggle with the face, what I do is I place a simple mask like this boom, and I just try to check if it looks alright. So pretty much because of these lines here and these here, we can check if the perspective of the face actually makes sense. And also flipping this will help you with spotting if it actually looks alright. Boom. So pretty much these angles here will be the same, then here and here will be the same, and then boom, this goes down and this goes down below, and you have a simple mask. Same from a more front view. So boom, boom, and then something like this, boom, boom, like that, and we have a mask. And just try to fit the filter features in there. So pretty much then you go in, then go out, boom. So this would be the plane for the nose, like that, boom, boom, and here, like that. Now tip number 29, this tip will actually combine with the mask, will actually help you a lot. So pretty much tip 29 is check eyes. And to do that, what we can do is pretty much just take the inner corner of the eye, boom, and then connect them using a straight line. Then take the outer corners, boom, and connect them as well, boom. And then you can take like the lowest part of the bottom of the eyes and just try this and just try them to be parallel to each other. So you can see here that they are actually parallel to each other. And now combined with the mask, you can check if these lines are also parallel to this here. So this here, here, boom, boom, and this, boom. And if it is, then it makes sense, boom, and the perspective works. Now tip number 30. This tip will actually help you draw much more expressive anime faces. So tip number 30 is expressions. So basically all you need for expressions are two things, pretty much eyes, like here, and eyebrows. So pretty much if you have like more closed eyes like that and lower eyebrows, then you'll get an expressions like this. But now if you have eyes maybe with lower eyebrows like this, maybe an eye here like that, another eyebrow like here, now it just looks angry, boom, something like that, this even lower, boom, and you have an angrier character. Now going here, if you push the bottom eyelid a little bit and make it curved, what it will do is it will look like the character is smiling a little bit. So combine this with the lips and you can actually make the character smile a lot. So you can see here, and also if you push the eyebrows now higher, it just looks more smiley. So all you need is just eyebrows, eyes, and sometimes mouth to show a lot of expressions. And you can also check out my Patreon tutorial on how to draw anime faces and also get other tutorials, which are monthly tutorials. Link in the description. Now if you're struggling with drawing just a simple anime faces, you can check out this video here that will help you with it. Bye!